Starting.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Skylar Fisher, and I am the Spring 2020 intern for the NRLT. And this week, for our Connect to the Outdoors series, we are going to be live streaming a reading of children's books. So this week, we are going to be reading The Ugly Vegetables by Grace Lynn and Alejandro's Gift by Richard E. Albert. So we would really love for you to leave a comment if any books that you've been reading during this quarantine or where you're watching this video from. And after this video is done, I'm going to review the comments and see where everybody's coming from and any book recommendations for all of us to read and stay entertained during this self-isolation. If you didn't tune in last week, we have started this Connect to the Outdoors series where once a week for the month of April, the NRLT is going to be streaming on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. different ways to connect to the outdoors and kind of motivate us to be outside and enjoy this open space while we're all kind of on shutdown right now. And last week we did a segment on invasive plant removal, which I definitely recommend you to check out after this live stream is done. It's on the NRLT Facebook timeline. That being said, we are going to start with The Ugly Vegetables by Grace Lynn, and I really recommend for you to find a nice place outdoors, kind of sit down, relax, and enjoy the reading. In the spring, I helped my mother start our garden. We used tall shovels to turn the grass upside down, and I saw pink worms wriggle around. It was hard work. When we stopped to get rest, we saw that the neighbors were starting their gardens too. "Hello, Irma," my mother called to Miss Krumermine. Miss Krumermine was digging too. She was using a small shovel, one that fit in her hand. "Mommy," I asked, "why are we using such big shovels? Miss Krumermine has a small one." "Because our garden needs more digging," she said. I helped my mother plant the seeds, and we dragged the hose to the garden. "Hi, Linda." "Hi, Mickey," I called to the Fitzgeralds. They were sprinkling water on their garden with green watering can. "Mommy," I asked, "why are we using a hose? Linda and Mickey are using watering cans." "Because our garden needs more water," she said. Then my mother drew funny pictures on pieces of paper and stuck them into the garden. "Hello, Roseanne," my mother called across the street to Miss Angel Howe. "Mommy," I asked, "why are we sticking these papers in the garden? Miss Angel Howe has seed packages in her garden." "Because our garden is going to grow Chinese vegetables," she told me. "These are the names of the vegetables in Chinese, so I can tell which plants are growing where." One day, I saw our garden growing. Little green stems that looked like grass had popped up from the ground. I rushed over to the neighbors' gardens to see if they had grown as well. Their plants looked like little leaves. "Mommy," I asked, "why do our plants look like grass? The neighbors' plants look different than ours." "Because they are growing flowers," she said. "Why can't we grow flowers?" I asked. "These are better than flowers," she said. Soon, all the neighbors' gardens were blooming. Up and down the streets grew rainbows of flowers. The wind always smelled sweet, and butterflies and bees flew everywhere. Everyone's gardens was beautiful, except for ours. Ours was all dark green and ugly. "Why didn't we grow flowers?" I asked again. "These are better than flowers," Mommy said again. I looked, but saw only black, purple, green vines, fuzzy, wrinkled leaves, prickly stems, and a few little yellow flowers. "I don't think so," I said. "You wait and see," Mommy said. Before long, our vegetables grew. Some were big and lumpy. Some were thin and green and covered with bumps. Some were just plain icky yellow. They were ugly vegetables. Sometimes I would go over neighbors and look at their pretty gardens. They would show the poppies and the peonies and petunias to me, and I would feel sad that our garden wasn't as nice. One day, my mother and I picked the vegetables from the garden. She filled a whole wheelbarrow full of them. We wheeled them to the kitchen. My mother washed them and took a big knife and started to chop them up. "Ay, yow," she said when she cut them. She had used all of her strength. These vegetables were hard and tough. "This is a shou huang gua," Mommy said, and handing me a bumpy, curled vegetable. She pointed at the other vegetables. "This is a shin sai, and this is a tong hua." I went outside to play. While I was playing catch with Mickey, a magical aroma filled the air. I saw the neighbors standing on their porches with their eyes closed, smelling the sky. They took deep breaths of air, like they were trying to catch the smell. The wind carried it up and down the street. Even the bees and butterflies seemed to smell the scent in the breeze. I smelled it too. It made me hungry, and it was coming from my house. When I followed it up to my house, my mother was putting a big bowl of soup on the table. The soup was yellow and red and green and pink. "This is a special soup," Mommy said, and she smiled. She gave me a small bowl full of it, and I tasted it. It was so good. The flavors of the soup seemed to dance in my mouth and laugh all the way down to my stomach. I smiled. "Do you like it?" Mommy asked me. I nodded and held out my bowl for some more. "It's made from our vegetables," she told me. Then the doorbell rang and we ran to open the door. All of our neighbors were standing at the door, holding flowers. "We noticed you were cooking," Mr. Fitzgerald laughed as he held out his flowers, "and we thought maybe you might be interested in a trade." We laughed too, and my mother gave them each their own bowl of her special soup. My mother told them what each vegetable was and how she grew it. She gave them the soup recipe and put some soup into jars for them to take home. I ate 5 bowls of soup. It was the best dinner ever. The next spring, when my mother was starting her garden, we planted some flowers next to the Chinese vegetables. Mrs. Krumermine, the Fitzgeralds, and the Angel House planted some Chinese vegetables next to their flowers. Soon, the whole neighborhood was growing Chinese vegetables in their gardens. Up and down the street, little green plants poked out of the ground. Some looked like leaves, and some looked like grass. And when the flowers started blooming, you could smell the soup in the air. Now, here at the end of Ugly Vegetables, there's a lovely recipe with some of the vegetables mentioned in the book. And once this live stream is done, I'm going to share a PDF of that recipe so that everyone has access to it. And this is a really lovely book because it really shows the importance of understanding the shared value of both the flowers and the vegetables. And it was really lovely that originally it was only the flowers that had the great scent, but then at the end it was the soup as well. And so it's important not to judge something by the first impression, because although those were ugly vegetables, they made delicious soup that everybody loved and wanted some of. So now going on to the next book, Alejandro's Gift by Richard E. Albert. Alejandro's small adobe house stood beside a lonely desert road. Beside the house stood a well, and a windmill to pump water from the well. Water for Alejandro and for his only companion, a burro, were the sole users of the well. It was a lonely place, and Alejandro welcomed any who stopped to refresh themselves at the well. But visitors were few, and after they left, Alejandro felt lonelier than ever. 2 more easily endure the lonely hours, Alejandro planted a garden filled with carrots, beans, and large brown onions, tomatoes and corn, melons, squash, and small red peppers. Most mornings found Alejandro tending to the garden, watching it grow. These were times he cherished, and he often stayed for hours, working until driven indoors by the desert heat. The days went by, one after another, with little change, until one morning when there was an unexpected visitor. The visitor came not from the desert road, but from the desert itself. A ground squirrel crept from the underbrush. Moving warily over the sand, it hesitated and looked around. Alejandro paused, keeping very quiet as the squirrel approached the garden. It ran up to one of the furrows, drank its fill of water, and scampered away. After it left, Alejandro realized that for those few moments, his loneliness had been all but forgotten. And because he felt less lonely, Alejandro found himself hoping the squirrel would come back again. The squirrel did come back again, from time to time bringing along small friends. Wood rats and pocket gophers, jackrabbits, kangaroo rats, pocket mice, birds too became aware of Alejandro's garden. Roadrunners, Gila woodpeckers, thrashers, cactus wrens, sage sparrows, mourning doves, and others came to the evening to perch on the branches of a mesquite bush, or to rest in the arms of a lone saguaro before dropping down for a quick drink before nightfall. Occasionally, even an old desert tortoise could be seen plodding toward the garden. Suddenly, Alejandro found that the time was passing more quickly. He was rarely lonely. He had only to look up from his hoe, or from whenever he might be at any moment, to find a small friend nearby. For a while, this was all mattered to Alejandro, but after a time he wasn't so sure. He began asking himself if there was something more important than just making himself feel less lonely. It took Alejandro little time to see there was. He began to realize that his tiny desert friends came to his garden not for company, but for water. And he found himself thinking of the other animals in the desert. Animals like coyotes and the desert gray fox, the bobcats, the skunks, the badgers, the long-nosed cooties, wild pigs of the desert, and even the peccaries, the antlered mule deer, the does, and the fawns. Finding enough water was not a problem. With his windmill, Alejandro could supply ample water. With his well, for any and for all. Giving it to those who needed it was something else. The something else, Alejandro decided, was a desert watering hole. Without delay, Alejandro began digging. It was tiring work, taking many days in the hot desert sun. But the thought of giving water to so many thirsty desert dwellers was more important than made up for drudgery. And when it was filled, Alejandro was pleased with the gift he had made for his desert friends. There was a good reason to suppose it would take time for the larger animals to discover their new source of water, so Alejandro was patient. He went about, as usual, feeding his burro, tending the garden, and doing countless other chores. Days passed, and nothing happened. Still, Alejandro was confident. But the days turned to weeks, and it was still quiet at the watering hole. Why, Alejandro wondered, weren't they coming? What could he have done wrong? The absence of the desert folk might have remained a mystery had Alejandro not come out of his house one morning when a skunk was in the clearing beyond the watering hole. Seeing Alejandro, the skunk darted to safety in the underbrush. It suddenly became very clear why Alejandro's gift was shunned. Alejandro couldn't believe he had been so thoughtless. but what was important now was to put things right as quickly as possible. Water hole number 2 was built far from the house and screened by heavy desert growth. When it was filled and ready, Alejandro waited with mixed emotions. He was hopeful, yet he couldn't forget what had happened the first time. As it turned out, he was not disappointed. The animals of the desert did come, each as it made its own discovery, because the water hole now sheltered from the small adobe house and the desert road. The animals were no longer fearful. And although Alejandro could not see through the desert growth surrounding the watering hole, he had ways of knowing it was no longer being shunned. By the twitter of the birds gathering in the dusk, by the rustling of mesquite in the quiet desert evening, telling of the approach of a coyote, a badger, or maybe a desert fox. By the soft hoofed beats of a mule deer, or the unmistakable sound of the peccaries charging toward the watering hole. And in these moments, when Alejandro sat quietly listening to the sounds of his desert neighbors, he knew that the gift was not so much a gift that he had given, but a gift he had received. Now, there's a last page in this book which covers the different animals that were discussed within this reading. And I really encourage everyone who has a little bit of time to research the southwestern region of the United States, and how, just shown in this book, it's believed that, deserts are empty because they're a whole bunch of sand and dirt, but really they have some of the most complex and beautiful ecosystems around. And I think this is a really important story to think about, especially right now when we're social distancing, because it's really important that we take steps to not feel so lonely and we go outside. And also, the message at the end was he did this not because he wanted friends, but because he wanted to benefit the animals around, which is a really cool lesson to learn about helping those around us. So those are the 2 books for today, and thank you for listening in. I really appreciate it. And please, like I said, leave a comment below on what literature you've been reading to keep you entertained. These books, I love these books, but I can always use more. We're always looking for more books to read about the environment or otherwise. And anything else, if you're interested in seeing different types of content on this page, we'd really appreciate a comment about what you would like to see as well. And other than that, we hope you tune in next week, April 21st, Tuesday at 1 p.m., same time, same date, where we will be doing, right back here at Freshwater Farms, a virtual tour of the wetlands. So we really hope to see you then. And until then, stay well and stay safe.